The snow came down heavy enough to cover the fallen. On the pale ridge, they tagged her KIA and pulled back without a word. Nobody turned around. Nobody checked for a pulse. She stayed there for 4 hours, blood icing beneath the snow, fingers locked around her rifle. When night finally settled in, her eyes opened. No crying out, no plea for help. She whispered a single line, just loud enough for the wind to drag it across the field. "I'll make them pay for this." Sergeant Mara Voss had quit correcting people 3 months earlier. When Lieutenant Hale called her the girl with the rifle, she didn't respond. When Private Rourke joked about babysitting duty during her watch, she tightened her scope and let her grouping answer for her. 400 meters, center mass, every time. Forward operating base. Redstone Vale sat low in a valley where winter showed up early and refused to leave. By November, the roads were already gone. The temperature hadn't risen past 15 degrees in 2 weeks. Visibility dropped to 50 meters whenever the wind kicked up, which it did every afternoon like habit. Mara had been watching the weather since day one. Wind shifted northwest to southwest, between 14 and 1600. Pressure drops warned of storms 3 days out. She kept it all logged in a notebook sealed in waterproof wrap. Captain Lucas Ward didn't take weather reports from a sniper. He trusted satellite feeds and meteorological units. "We move at dawn," he said during the evening brief. "Intel confirms the ridgeline is clear. We establish position before the next system rolls in." Mara studied the terrain map stretched across the plywood table. The ridge gave elevation, but the route squeezed through a narrow draw, trees closing in on both sides. No other approach without adding 6 hours. "Sir," she said evenly, "that draw is a choke point. If they know we're coming." "They don't know we're coming, Sergeant." Ward didn't lift his eyes. "That's what a recon in force is for. The tree line gives concealment for overwatch. If we're funneled, I've been reading terrain since before you enlisted, Voss." Then he looked up. "Air support is on standby. QRF is ready. This is textbook." Across the table, Staff Sergeant Evan Pike met her gaze. He'd spotted for her in training. He understood her thinking. His slight headshake said it wasn't worth pushing. Let it go. She did. The briefing moved on. Loadouts, comms, medevac, standard procedures. All by the book. Mara listened without another word. But her thoughts kept circling that draw and how it would look through glass. Afterward, Pike found her outside the command tent, breaking down her rifle. "You seeing something he missed?" His breath fogged in the cold. "Boot prints." She didn't look up from the bolt. Satellite imagery, 3 clicks east of the ridge, fresh enough to cast shadows. Someone crossed there in the last 48 hours. Could be friendlies, civilians maybe. She slid the bolt back together smoothly. But the spacing fits a military file, 4 to 6, and they paused to watch the exact approach we're taking. Pike went quiet. "You tell Ward?" He said Intel cleared it. "Intel clears plenty of things." Mara finished and met his eyes. Pike had 2 tours already. He knew how bad Intel could get. "You think I'm paranoid?" "I think you see what others miss. Always have." He pulled his jacket tighter. "But Ward's 20 years in. He won't alter a plan over boot prints a sergeant spotted on a satellite image." "I know. So what now?" She stood, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. "I do my job." That night, while the unit slept, Mara sat in the comms bunker, reviewing every image from the past week. The tracks were there, faint but real. And worse, drag marks near the trees where something heavy had been set, then moved. She printed the photos and tucked them into her chest pocket. At 0500, the unit stepped off in the dark. 23 soldiers, full kit. Mara took her place near the back of the column, right where a sniper belonged. Better to watch from behind than walk point. The movement began quietly, the way patrols always did. Boots crunched through snow, broken only by the soft hiss of radio static. The sky hadn't lightened yet, but the snow threw back enough dull glow to move without night vision. By 0630, they reached the entrance to the draw. Captain Lucas Ward ordered a halt. Mara Voss shifted to a spot where she could glass the ground ahead. Through her scope, everything flattened into shades of gray: trees, snow, shadow, and then something out of place. On the left side, 50 meters upslope, the snow showed disturbance, not wind-made drift. Something had been there and covered just recently, recent enough that the wind hadn't erased it. She keyed her radio. Actual Sierra 2, possible fighting position, left flank, grid 472891, standby, Sierra 2. Silence then. Overwatch reports negative, no thermals, no movement. Roger. But snow pattern indicates, Sierra 2. This is actual. Hold position and stop cluttering the net. We move in 60 seconds. Mara lowered the handset. Beside her, Evan Pike had his own optic on the tree line. You see it? She asked low. I see disturbed snow. Could be anything. Could be. Neither of them believed that. The column stepped off again. Mara stayed tight on her scan as the draw closed in exactly like the map showed. Trees crowded both sides, perfect cover for anyone willing to wait. Every instinct she had screamed wrong. All of it wrong. But instinct wasn't proof. And proof didn't matter if command refused to see it. 200 meters in, she caught the second sign, this time on the right. Same layout, same hurried concealment. Actual Sierra 2, second possible position, right flank. The ambush detonated. Fire erupted from 3 directions at once, and Mara knew instantly this wasn't chance contact. It was deliberate, rehearsed. The front of the column folded under the first burst. She dropped and rolled behind a fallen tree as rounds snapped overhead, snow detonating where she'd stood moments before. Her radio filled with overlapping voices, casualties, bearings, air requests. She found the flashes through her scope. Left side, elevated, 2 shooters. Wind, range, angle, logged. First round hit center mass, dropping the lead shooter. 3 seconds later, his partner took 1 through the throat. Right side was worse. A single gunner with a machine gun. Longer range, unstable wind. She slowed her breathing, settled the reticle and pressed. The gun fell silent. Sierra 2, solid work, keep suppressing left. Ward's voice came through steady, controlled. But underneath it, she heard the cost. This was the choke point she'd warned about, and people were paying for it. She kept working, clean and deliberate. No satisfaction, no anger, just math and timing and targets. Pike slid in beside her, breathing fast, blood streaking his left arm. You hit, she asked, never breaking sight. Grays, I'm good. He started calling targets. 12 o'clock, 200, behind the thick pine. Branches complicated the shot. She waited for the wind to pause and fired. The figure dropped. QRF is 10 minutes out, Pike said. Air is weathered in. The storm had moved faster than forecast. Of course it had. She'd known that. The fight dragged on. The enemy had prep and ground. The unit had discipline and training. Gradually, fire evened out. Mara's barrel burned despite the cold as she cleared left, right, center. Any flash, any movement. Eventually, incoming rounds thinned. The enemy wasn't broken, just pulling back. They'd done enough damage. Ward's voice cut in. All elements consolidate on me. Prep for emergency extract. The unit peeled back in bounds, firing and moving. Mara stayed overwatch, watching for pursuit. She saw none. They were gone, slipping back into the terrain, which meant they knew extraction was coming, which meant they were listening. Sir, they're monitoring our frex, she transmitted. Recommend alternate. Sierra 2, comply and move now. She swallowed the reply and shifted, but took a separate line through thicker ground, shadowing the unit instead of following it. If someone still had eyes out, she wasn't offering a clear shot. That choice kept her alive. The round came from a pocket no one had cleared. She felt the hit before the sound. High chest, right side. The plate caught most of it, not all. She slammed down, her rifle spinning into the snow. For a heartbeat, there was only white sky and pain. Her right lung wasn't pulling air, blood filling places it shouldn't. She tried the radio, but her right arm wouldn't answer. With her left, she dragged the handset close and keyed it. Sierra 2 hit. Every word she forced out stole air she didn't have to give. The radio crackled back. Sierra 2, state your position. She tried to answer, but her lungs wouldn't draw enough breath. The edges of the world blurred. More voices cut in, urgent now. The enemy had opened fire again, striking the consolidation point. Multiple casualties. What was supposed to be a controlled pullback was turning into a scramble. Somewhere overhead, rotor blades thundered in. The extraction bird was coming in hot. She tried to move, to crawl for her rifle, to do anything useful, but her body refused to cooperate. The snow beneath her was going dark with red. When did that happen? Boots crunched past her, someone running hard. She tried to shout, but only a wet cough came out. More footsteps, then fewer. Everyone was moving away. Through pain, cold, and the fog creeping into her thoughts, she heard Captain Lucas Ward on the radio. All personnel accounted for, lifting now. That was wrong. She wasn't on the bird. She was still here, bleeding into the snow. She keyed the radio again. Sierra 2, not accounted. Only static answered. The helicopter's pitch shifted. They were pulling out. With everything she had left, Mara rolled onto her side. Through the trees, she saw the aircraft already climbing, 100 feet up and rising. She lifted her left hand, a useless motion. No one was looking her way. In the chaos of gunfire, wounded calls and confusion, someone had marked her KIA. Maybe they saw her fall. Maybe they called her name and she couldn't answer. Maybe she was simply lost in the seconds when everything went wrong. The reason didn't matter. The helicopter vanished over the ridge. The sound faded, and Mara Voss was alone on the field, listed as dead, a hole in her chest, and hostile soldiers somewhere in the trees. She lay there listening. After the fight, the forest had gone quiet. No gunfire, no radios, only wind and the hush of falling snow. The cold was helping, slowing the bleeding, keeping her awake when shock should have dragged her under. She remembered that from training. Hypothermia and trauma, usually lethal together, could sometimes buy time. She needed time. She needed to move, because the enemy would come back to clear the field, collect gear, confirm kills, and if they found her breathing, they wouldn't leave her that way. Mara forced focus through the pain. First priority, bleeding. She rolled fully onto her side and reached her medical pouch. Her hands shook as she packed hemostatic gauze into the wound. The pain nearly took her out, but she stayed conscious. Second priority, weapon. Her rifle lay 3 meters away, half buried where it had skidded to a stop. She dragged herself toward it, every movement sending fire through her chest. When she reached it, she pulled it close and checked the action. It still worked. Third priority, cover. Staying exposed meant dying. Using the rifle like a cane, she hauled herself toward a cluster of rocks 30 meters off. It felt endless. By the time she reached them, full dark had settled in. She wedged herself between 2 boulders and pulled snow over her. Not much, just enough to break her shape. Then she waited, rifle across her legs, to see which way it would go. Hours slid by. The cold shifted from pain to numbness, to something close to comfort, which she knew was dangerous. The bleeding had slowed, but her breathing stayed shallow and tight. The round had likely collapsed part of her right lung. She needed surgery. Instead, she had stone, snow, and a rifle. Voices dragged her back from the edge, a language she didn't understand, but the tone said enough. They were sweeping the area, looking for weapons, intel, anything useful. Flashlights cut through the trees. 5, maybe 6 figures, moving slow and deliberate. They reached the spot where she'd been hit. One knelt, studying the blood-stained snow. He said something, and the others laughed, the kind of humor soldiers everywhere shared. That much blood meant no survivors. They were wrong. Mara didn't move. She barely breathed. Her finger rested on the trigger guard, but firing now would only finish what the bullet had started. She was one person against at least 5, wounded, low on ammunition. So she stayed still, hidden in her shallow scrape, just another shape swallowed by night. Eventually, the patrol moved off, drifting back toward their own lines. When the final beam of light vanished, Mara let herself draw a full breath. It burned, Everything burned, but she was still alive. And somewhere during those endless hours in the snow, waiting to be discovered or forgotten, something hardened inside her. Her own unit had left her. They'd marked her dead and pulled out without confirming. Captain Lucas Ward, who brushed aside every warning she gave. Lieutenant Hale, who treated her like dead weight. Even Evan Pike, who should have known better. She understood necessity. She understood that chaos bred mistakes. She didn't hate them for it. But when the helicopter lifted away without her, she made them a promise, one the winter wind carried across the empty ground. I'll make them pay for this. Not revenge. Something colder. Final. She would live. She would finish the mission they failed. And she would walk back into Forward Operating Base Redstone Vale alive after they'd written her off. Then, they would understand exactly what they left behind in the snow. The storm arrived 2 hours before dawn, precisely when she'd forecast it. She'd improved her hide as best she could, packing snow into a crude wall and using her poncho to trap a pocket of warmer air. Her core temperature hovered in the danger zone, low enough to slow bleeding and metabolism, not low enough to end her. The storm tore through the valley, cutting visibility to arm's length. In training, they called storms like this survival negative. You hid and waited. Moving meant death. But Mara ran the numbers differently now. Alone, wounded, behind enemy lines. Staying put meant freezing slowly. Moving meant risk, but also a chance at supplies or shelter. She chose to move. Using her rifle like a cane, she pulled herself free and stepped into the storm. The wind slammed into her, driving snow into her face and stealing what little heat she'd saved. She pulled her balaclava up, cinched her hood, and started walking, not toward friendly lines. That path led back through the kill zone, where enemy eyes would be waiting. Instead, she moved parallel to the ridge, letting the ground guide her. Before the ambush, she'd memorized the map. 3 kilometers east sat an abandoned structure, marked as a shepherd's shelter. Maybe empty, maybe not, but it was her best chance. The march became willpower, overriding flesh. Every step felt final. Her damaged lungs starved her of air. The cold leached strength. Pain settled into a constant hum she ignored because she had no alternative. Mara had always done well with the impossible. That was why they'd made her a sniper. She navigated by fragments of terrain the storm allowed her to see. A bent rock here, a dead tree there, the map unfolding into reality. She'd always been able to read ground that way, to connect paper to earth without thinking. After what felt like forever, she found the shelter. It was barely standing. Stone walls waist high, a sagging roof, an open doorway, but it blocked the wind. No fresh tracks marked the snow around it. Empty, then, or abandoned long enough for the storm to erase the truth. She swept the shelter with her rifle, checking every corner, every shadow. Nothing but snow and dead leaves. Satisfied, she slid down against the far wall and finally let herself rest. That brought up the next problem. If she didn't deal with the wound properly, she was going to die anyway. The field dressing was soaked through. It needed repacking, and she should have had a chest seal, which she didn't. She needed antibiotics, which she didn't have. She needed morphine for the pain, which she very much didn't have. What she did have was training and a refusal to quit. Mara peeled off her outer layers and examined the damage in the weak light. The round had come in at an angle, likely deflecting off the armor plate before punching through. That deflection probably saved her life, slowing it just enough, but the damage was still severe. Broken ribs for sure, a partially collapsed lung, internal bleeding she hoped was under control. She repacked the wound with the last of her gauze, then pulled duct tape from her repair kit and fashioned a crude chest seal. It wasn't pretty, but it would limit air leakage and give the lung a chance. The pain was overwhelming. She had to stop twice just to keep from blacking out. When she finished, she sat in the dark and took stock. Rifle, 4 magazines, 120 rounds, 3 protein bars, water purification tablets, but no water yet, 1 survival blanket, knife, signal mirror, Compass, map, blood-stained but legible, and the printed satellite photos showing enemy positions. That last item made her smile. The images had been right. They'd walked straight into the trap she warned them about. And now, she was the only one left with proof. Unless she lived long enough to show it. The storm dragged on through the day. Mara drifted between sleep and wakefulness, her body forcing rest while her mind fought it. When awake, she planned. When she slept, she dreamed of things that didn't exist out here: warmth, clean beds, morphine. By evening, the storm eased enough for her to step outside. She needed water. Dehydration would finish her faster than infection. She packed clean snow into her canteen, let body heat melt it, then dropped in a purification tablet. It tasted awful, but it was liquid, and that mattered. She also needed a picture of the enemy layout. The ambush had been deliberate, which meant strong situational awareness. They would know about this shelter. They might even intend to use it. She moved to the doorway and scanned the terrain through her scope. Fresh snow had wiped away tracks, but smoke curled from a spot roughly 2 kilometers northwest. A fire. Someone staying warm. She marked it mentally and kept scanning. Another position sat about 3 kilometers north. Elevated, likely on the ridge where her unit had tried to set overwatch. The enemy had taken the ground Ward wanted. A third position revealed itself when someone crossed an opening southeast, around 4 kilometers out. That one sat between her and friendly lines. She was wounded, alone, and behind enemy positions. On paper, it was unrecoverable. Doctrine said evade if you could, communicate if you couldn't, survive until rescue. But rescue believed she was dead, and Mara was beginning to see a different path. She wasn't trapped behind them. She was behind their overwatch, armed with a long gun and intimate knowledge of their setup. Dawn broke under clear skies, cold, sharp enough to bite the lungs. She'd spent the night reinforcing her hide and preparing. The chest seal was holding. Breathing was still rough, but better. She wasn't dying today. She chose her first target carefully. The fire position northwest had the worst discipline. Keeping a fire all night meant arrogance or desperation. Either way, it made them visible. Before first light, she shifted to a rocky outcrop with clean sightlines and multiple escape routes. The movement was brutal, but the position was perfect. Through her scope, she watched the enemy wake. 4 soldiers. Competent, organized, but careless. Why wouldn't they be? As far as they knew, they'd won yesterday. The Americans had pulled back. The ground belonged to them. Mara settled in behind her rifle. This was always her strongest moment, the space between preparation and action. Everything narrowed down to numbers and breath. Wind speed, range, angle, pressure. Her body solved it before her thoughts caught up. The first round dropped the sentry at 0712. Center mass, clean. He fell without a sound. The others wouldn't notice for another 3 minutes. By then, Mara was already shifting to a secondary hide 200 meters away. Their reaction followed doctrine. They set a perimeter and started hunting the shooter. But they searched the wrong sector, convinced the shot had come from the south, from friendly ground. They never considered it came from behind their own lines. Her second shot followed 15 minutes later from the new position. Another sentry, this one fumbling for his radio. He went down with a handset still clenched in his hand. Now they understood. You don't lose 2 men to chance. Someone was stalking them. Mara displaced again, moving through terrain she'd studied the night before. She left no clear tracks, scuffed the snow only where unavoidable, letting the wind erase what remained. It was a skill passed down by instructors who'd been ghosts long before she ever touched a rifle. Be what they can't see, can't predict, can't stop. The third position gave her eyes on the elevated site to the north. This one was bigger, maybe 8 soldiers, dug in properly with overlapping fields of fire. Harder targets. But they'd just taken a frantic radio call about a sniper inside their perimeter, and that made them tense. Tension bred mistakes. She waited. Patience mattered more than accuracy. You didn't shoot because you could. You waited until everything aligned. At 8:43 it did. An officer stepped into the open, obvious by the way the others deferred, pointing at a map between positions. Bad fieldcraft. But officers often relied on authority more than discipline. The shot was difficult, uphill, roughly 600 meters, wind gusting from the west. But she'd done worse in training. She slowed her breathing, settled her heart, found the pause between beats, and pressed the trigger. The officer dropped. Chaos followed, sharp and sudden. The remaining soldiers fired blindly into trees and snow. They had no idea where the shot came from, only that their leader was dead, and the same unseen hunter was still out there. Mara didn't fire again. She knew better. Control meant knowing when not to shoot. She slipped away while they panicked, relocating as they wasted ammunition. By midday, 2 more positions fell the same way. 1 shot, clean withdrawal, no pattern they could follow. Let their fear do the work for her. She wasn't trying to annihilate them. She was trying to make them scared, and it was working. Through her scope, she watched soldiers abandon positions. Not a rout, more a careful pullback. But they were surrendering ground they'd fought for. Because somewhere out there, hidden in snow and shadow, someone unseen was killing them with a single round at a time. They started calling her the Ghost. She knew because she'd crept close enough to overhear them talking. They believed a full sniper team had slipped in during the storm. Maybe some elite unit operating behind their lines. The truth was worse. It was one woman they'd left for dead, and she was furious, but controlled. By the 3rd day, they'd adapted. Mara saw it in the way they moved. Radios went silent or shifted to unfamiliar bands. Movement happened only at night. Multiple sentries covered every angle. And most telling, they began setting obvious bait, exposed positions meant to draw her shot and reveal her. She ignored everyone. Instead, she observed. From hide to hide, she mapped their defenses, supply lines, comms habits, leadership flow. She saw where they were strong, and more importantly, where they weren't. They were afraid. Fear made them cautious. Cautious troops didn't patrol hard or chase contacts. They waited for orders, and higher command was clearly trying to decide how to deal with a ghost. Mara survived on melted snow and the last of her protein bars. Her wound was infected despite everything she'd done. Fever came and went. Some hours she functioned almost normally. Other times, standing felt impossible. She kept moving anyway. On the 3rd evening, she caught a radio transmission. New frequency, sloppy discipline, just fragments. 6 confirmed casualties to sniper fire. Pattern indicates single mobile shooter. Request air assets to sanitize. Negative. Weather closing in. Ground elements will contain. That told her everything. They weren't hunting her anymore. They were trying to pen her in until overwhelming force arrived. That only worked on people who behaved predictably. That night, she did the opposite of what they expected. She moved toward them, past forward positions, through gaps in their perimeter, all the way to what looked like a command node, a reinforced bunker left from an earlier war. She didn't attack it. She watched. Radios, detailed maps, officers rotating on a schedule. This was their nerve center. Taking it out would hurt more than 100 isolated kills. But she wasn't a demolition team. She stored the knowledge and pulled back. Intelligence mattered as much as bullets. Before dawn, she returned to a hide she'd prepared 2 days earlier, her best yet, tucked beneath a fallen tree with cover from multiple angles. She could stay here for days, which mattered, because she was running out of strength. The fever worsened. Infection crept despite the cold slowing it. She began to hallucinate at times, trees shifting, voices that vanished when she focused. Classic signs. She needed antibiotics. She needed extraction. But first, there was one more problem. She'd identified their best sniper. He was the one setting counter-sniper positions, trying to anticipate her moves. He was good. He'd nearly found her twice. Nearly wasn't enough. She located him late on the 4th day, perfectly placed with oversight of the command post. He expected her there eventually. His position was almost flawless. Any direct shot would expose her, and he had the patience to wait. so she didn't target him. She put a round into a supply truck 300 meters behind his hide, not to destroy it, just to panic the unloading team. They scattered. The sniper, doing exactly what a professional would do, turned to assess the disturbance. That was the opening. She fired once. Through the glass, she watched him collapse. Her most dangerous opponent was gone. On the morning of the 5th day, they came in force. Not a patrol, not probing. A full combat element with vehicles, sweeping the grid methodically. Mara had known it would come to this. You could only bleed an enemy so long before they committed everything. The only question was whether they'd reach her before her body quit. She'd chosen this position days earlier, a rocky slope with layered approaches and a clear view of the valley. Not perfect, but flexible. Her rifle held 2 magazines now, 48 rounds. Not enough for a siege, enough to hurt them. Through her scope, she watched them advance, smarter this time. Small teams, spaced out, smoke covering movement. Every likely hide checked. Professional, disciplined, still afraid. She waited. At 200 meters, distance stopped mattering. The first shot shattered the morning quiet. Their point man dropped. The rest scattered into cover, firing at ghosts. Mara had already shifted inside her hide. They called for reinforcements. More troops poured in from the trees. They were all in now, assuming she was wounded and nearly dry. They weren't wrong, but that didn't save them. Her second shot took the squad leader. Momentum stalled. Even trained units hesitate without direction. She used that pause to relocate again, 30 meters to fresh cover, and the cycle began once more. They pushed forward. She fired. They dove for cover. She displaced. Over and over. A lethal rhythm of patience and precision. Numbers didn't matter. She was winning. But winning didn't mean surviving. A mortar round slammed into the hillside 50 meters from her hide. Then another. They'd brought indirect fire. If they couldn't see her, they'd erase every place she might be. Time to go. Mara grabbed her rifle and low-crawled away from the impacts. Fever warped everything. The blasts felt far away. The pain in her chest felt borrowed. But muscle memory held when her thoughts drifted. She reached a drainage ditch running downhill. Not cover, but distance. She slid down on her back, rifle tight to her chest, fighting blackness. At the bottom, she realized where she was. Near the command post she'd been watching. Most of their security had pushed forward to hunt her. The bunker was lightly guarded. She'd never planned to hit it, but combat rewarded timing. Missed chances came back to haunt you. 4 rounds left in the magazine. Through the scope, an officer stood outside, barking into a radio. 3 rounds. 2 comm specialists, hunched over maps and gear. 1 round. A guard at the entrance looking the wrong way. Empty. She dumped the mag and slammed in her last full one. 24 rounds. Then, she'd be dry. 24 was enough. She dismantled the command post without emotion. No rage, no satisfaction, just cold selection of targets that mattered. When they understood what was happening, it was already over. No officers, no radios, just confusion. The assault force unraveled. Units stopped advancing, tried to call leaders who were gone. She'd cut the head off the operation. Then her rifle clicked empty. 24 rounds, 24 targets. Perfect economy. After that, she had a knife and a failing body. Time to disappear. Captain Lucas Ward received the report at 18:30 on day 6. He sat in his quarters at Forward Operating Base Redstone Vale, rereading the casualty summary from the failed operation. Sergeant Mara Voss, KIA. Body not recovered due to enemy contact during extraction. Standard phrasing. The intelligence brief was not standard. Sir, you need to see this. Lieutenant Hale brought it himself instead of routing it. Ward read it twice. Then again. He set it down slowly. This can't be right. 3 independent confirmations, sir. Intercepts, satellite imagery tracking the attacks, and a human source who spoke to survivors. Hale's face stayed neutral. They're calling her the ghost sniper. They think it's a woman. Small boot prints at multiple sites. One survivor saw her briefly. Female, light build, operating alone. Ward picked up another file. The satellite images Mara had printed before the mission. The boot prints, the suspected positions. The target she's hitting, he said quietly. They match her assessment. Yes, sir. Which means she was right about the ambush. Yes, sir. Ward went silent. 20 years of decisions sat behind his eyes. This one would never leave him. She was marked KIA during extraction. Who made that call? Unknown, sir. Chaos, contact, casualties. Someone saw her fall and reported it. No confirmation. So we left a wounded soldier based on an assumption. Yes, sir. The quiet stretched. Outside, patrols returned. Voices. Generators. The normal sounds of evening. Normal. Except one of theirs had been out there 6 days. Wounded. Dismantling an enemy force alone. Get Pike in here, Ward said. And S2. I want everything on her status and likely location. Sir, the enemy is sweeping the area. If she's alive, Hale, she's alive. She's killed at least 12 while wounded and unsupported. She's alive. What he didn't say was that he needed her alive for reasons beyond operations. Because leaving her to die after ignoring her warnings was something he couldn't live with. Staff Sergeant Evan Pike arrived 10 minutes later. He'd been waiting, according to the runner. You trained with Voss, Ward said. How good is she? Best I've ever worked with, sir. No pause. She sees what others don't. Reads terrain faster than anyone. She doesn't miss. Could she survive 6 days like this? Pike thought. Most couldn't. Mara isn't most people. She's stubborn. She doesn't quit. He hesitated. Permission to speak freely? Granted. She warned us. She saw it coming. We didn't listen. We left her out there. Ward nodded once. I know. That's why we're fixing it. S2 is narrowing her position now. We launch recovery at first light. With respect, sir, that's too late. They're sweeping for her now and she's running out of time. Then we go to night. Gear up. Mara Voss started moving at 2200 on day 6. She'd spent the last 12 hours studying the enemy's search pattern. Thorough. She had to give them that. Grid by grid, methodical, but also predictable. Military movements always were. Large forces needed structure, and structure created patterns. Patterns created gaps. She found one, barely 500 meters between elements. Not much, but enough. If she moved at night and used the ground right, she could slip through. Once past their line, she'd have a chance to link up with friendlies, if her body held together. The fever never broke. Her wound bled again. Every deep breath felt like glass. But she hadn't survived this long to die hiding while they hunted her. So she walked. The night was clear and brutally cold. Her breath fogged the air, hanging too long. She forced it shallow, slow. Every sense stayed sharp despite the fever. Skill and stubbornness had carried her this far. They could carry her farther. The searchline sat exactly where she'd expected. Voices drifted through the dark. Flashlights swept back and forth. They expected her to hide. They expected her to run. They didn't expect her to walk straight at them and then passed. That was why it worked. She passed within 30 meters of one team, close enough to hear words, smell smoke. A shadow among shadows. Their lights crossed her position twice. Both times, she didn't move. Then she was through, behind them, between the enemy and friendly ground. She allowed herself one quiet moment. Then, she kept going. The terrain opened up, fewer places to hide, but the search teams were focused inward now. By the time they realized she'd slipped the net, she'd have hours if her body lasted. Around 0300, her legs quit. She went down face first in the snow and lay there, trying to remember how to stand. This was the edge. 6 days. 6 days of impossible survival. She wasn't stopping now. Not with friendly lines maybe 5 kilometers away. She forced herself up. Hands, knees, feet. Movement again. Dawn was bleeding into the sky when she saw the patrol. 3 soldiers, moving tactically. Fever blurred their outlines. Enemy or friendly. She raised her rifle, then remembered it was empty. Nothing but weight and hope. They saw her. Weapons came up. She stood there, too exhausted to fear it. One of them spoke into a radio. They didn't fire. They approached carefully. American voices. Identify yourself. Her answer came out broken. Voss. Mara. Sergeant. Charlie Company. Say again. Voss, she said. Then I'm the ghost. They froze. One keyed his radio. Actual Patrol 3. You're not going to believe this. We've got Sergeant Voss. Yes, sir. Alive. Barely. Hands caught her as her legs finally gave out. Voices, movement, warmth wrapping around her. A thermal blanket. We've got you, Sergeant. You're safe. Safe felt strange. She'd been unsafe so long it barely made sense. Did I? Her voice barely worked. Did I finish it? Ma'am, you've been missing 6 days. We thought you were dead. The mission, she pressed. Did we take the ridge? A pause. Yes, ma'am. After the enemy positions started taking hits from an unknown sniper, they pulled back. We secured it yesterday. She closed her eyes. Good. It mattered. Evac inbound, 5 minutes. She heard the helicopter before she saw it. The same sound as 6 days earlier, but this time, when they loaded her aboard, she was awake enough to see Evan Pike. You stubborn insane! He stopped and squeezed her hand hard. We looked. We didn't quit. She remembered another voice saying all personnel accounted for, but she didn't say it. There was no point. She let the medics work, let the bird lift her away, and finally let herself rest. The after-action report came 3 weeks later. Northern Sector Operation. 1 KIA upgraded to WIA. Multiple enemy casualties. Primary objective achieved. A single soldier operating behind enemy lines for 6 days, conducting an effective counter-sniper action that disrupted enemy operations and enabled friendly forces to seize key terrain. Dry. Technical. It missed everything that mattered. Mara read it from her hospital bed and set it aside. She'd been lucky, they said. The round missed major vessels. The cold prevented sepsis. Her lung reinflated with treatment. Lucky wasn't the word she would have used. She was expected to make a full recovery. Lucky, they said. Shot. Written off as dead. 6 days alone in winter, wounded and hunted, and still alive. Lucky felt like the wrong word. Captain Lucas Ward visited on her 4th day in the hospital. He stood at the foot of the bed, cap in his hands, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sergeant Voss, he started, formal and stiff. Sir, you don't need to apologize, she cut in. Combat is chaos. Mistakes happen. I should have listened to you about the ambush. Yes, sir. You should have. He winced. Good. Let it land. I should have verified the casualty call before declaring all personnel accounted for. Yes, sir. That too. I cost you. No, sir. She straightened despite the pull of stitches. You didn't cost me anything. What happened out there was mine. I survived because I chose to. I fought because I chose to. And I walked back because no one else was going to do it for me. Ward was silent for a long moment. Then, you saved the operation. The positions you eliminated were the same ones that hit us. Intel confirms your actions prevented them from reinforcing and overrunning our forward elements. I know, sir. I read the report. There will be commendations. Probably more than one. She didn't care. What mattered was being right and making sure the next warning didn't get ignored. Permission to speak freely. Granted. I don't want to meddle. I want you to remember that the soldier left behind might be the one who saves everyone else. I want you to remember that competence doesn't have a gender, and that when someone knows their job, you listen. She held his eyes. Can you do that, sir? Yes, Sergeant. I can. Then we're done. He left. She felt nothing watching him go. No triumph. No relief. Just quiet. Evan Pike came later, carrying illegal coffee and a candy bar. You're a legend now, he said. Whole base is talking about the ghost sniper. They say you dropped a dozen by yourself. 14, she corrected. I counted. He laughed. The kind of laugh that meant he was just glad she was breathing. Of course you did. They sat there, drinking awful coffee, avoiding the hard parts. Finally, he said it. I should have searched harder. Should have known you weren't dead. Should have, Evan. She rarely used his first name. Stop. You did what you could in an impossible mess. We all did. And I lived. That's what matters. You're not angry. I was for about 6 hours in the snow. I was furious. But anger doesn't keep you warm. Stop bleeding or steady a shot. She finished the coffee. So I let it go and focused on surviving, and making sure they understood what they'd left behind. 2 days later, she was flown out to a rear hospital for surgery and recovery. As the helicopter lifted from the base, she looked down at the frozen valley, where she'd almost died. Somewhere below, the enemy was still afraid of ghosts, still telling stories about the sniper who couldn't be killed, who walked out of the snow after being left for dead. Let them tell them. Let them be afraid. In those 6 days, Mara Voss learned something no one could take away. She was capable of more than anyone had ever given her credit for, including herself. And the next time someone questioned her, dismissed her warning, or underestimated her because she was quiet or young or didn't fit their picture, she'd remember. She'd remember surviving the unsurvivable and walking home through sheer will. She'd remember she was a ghost who refused to die.